So tonight we're going to continue a study we started a couple of Sundays ago talking about boundaries with kids. And as you know, I don't really like preaching on these things because I'm as lost as pretty much everybody else who's in the middle of them. So I figured I'd just go ahead and get them out of the way, and we'll handle it that way. But it does not. These studies, these books, boundaries, they're not original with me. Cloud and Townsend, who are psychologists and who are oriented to the Christian faith, wrote these books a number of years ago in a number of different categories. And so the things that we're looking at are based roughly through what they have, the principles they have set forth. We've kind of beefed them up a little bit and maybe made them a little more theologically sound, but otherwise, the books themselves are tremendous reads, worthy of consideration. And so throughout this study, a couple Sundays ago, we spent some time talking about the responsibilities of parents to children. What does the Bible say our responsibility is? And then we spent some time looking at why we need to have boundaries for children. And some of that has to do with the fact that they're not fully formed and developed people, and they have to learn how life works. And we're trying to enforce some of those things and help cultivate some of those things in them. And then we're trying to teach them what it means to love God, to love themselves, and to love their neighbor, and how all those things work together, which is a constant balancing act. And so we went through then, and we looked at a number of different laws. The laws stay the same in this series of books. Obviously, the applications to the groups change with time. And so where we pick up tonight is what would be the sixth law in their book, but we'll call it number one for us tonight. And that is the law of evaluation. Teaching our children that pain can be a gift. And so the idea behind this is when we draw boundaries for our kids, we need to spend time re-examining those boundaries. Okay? Is the boundary too tight? Is it too loose? Tweaking, understanding. And so not making sometimes when we make rules with our kids, we make absolute decrees, and then we have to eat a whole bunch of crow because we realize the decree was not as solid as we thought it was. So it's probably better that we try and work through some of those things and see how they work out. And this has to do with a principle, Ephesians 4 and verse 25, speaking, not supposed to lie to each other, but everyone speak the truth with his neighbor. And so we're trying to communicate to our children, and we're trying to evaluate whether or not these boundaries are working. And the boundaries that work for some people don't work for others. And that should not surprise us. No matter how many kids you have, they're all different. Wildly different. Okay? And so what works with some, or one or two, will not work with another. And of course, I don't have to tell you that. You understand that. So, when we look at this, when we're trying to evaluate a boundary we have drawn, a lot of times what people are drawn to is this boundary hurting my child? And one of the key distinctions we need to make is there is a difference between hurting my child's feelings and harming my child. Look, their feelings can be hurt because they don't understand life yet. You have to learn to deal with hurt feelings. They exist. They don't ever go away. But hurting their feelings is not the same as harming them. Harming them is has a negative connotation. Hurting their feelings, listen, it hurts my feelings every time I pull up my bank app and it doesn't say I have $3 million in it. But it doesn't, that's not a bad thing. They're not irreparably damaging me because they won't put that number in my account. And so, because what we have to learn, and what we have to learn as adults, and hopefully we have to teach our kids, is that pain can be a gift. You don't like that there is not enough money in that account? You're not helpless. You can actually do something about that. Okay? You don't like the circumstance? Change it. And so they have to confront that. But when we're evaluating these boundaries, that's the key. It's not about whether or not they get their feelings hurt or whether they cry. okay? I am stunned that people in my generation, they get their feelings hurt when their kids cry. I don't. That's what kids do. Kids cry, okay? That we shouldn't try and make them cry, but kids cry. That's going to happen. And if we get our feelings hurt, we have to mature ourselves as adults to not simply be completely controlled by the feelings of our children. So, these are the 4 rules Cloud and Townsend give concerning evaluating these issues. Number 1, don't let your child's pain control you. When you draw a boundary, and this is something they say in their book, which for me was extremely helpful, and that is, as a parent, it is my job to make rules. As a child, it is their job to break them and test them. And once you realize that, and quit taking it personally, you have put a boundary, and they're going to push against it to see how firm that boundary is. I don't have to get ripped out of shape every time you do what I don't tell you to do, every time you're doing something that I don't want you to do. All I have to do is hold that boundary. That's it. And so it kind of takes to where it helps us gain a sense of control in the situation to where we don't lose our control. Because that's what happens. Our children get out of control. They start losing their temper. They start doing different things, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we take it personally, and we lose our temper with them. Ironic, isn't it? I'm going to get onto them for losing their temper as I lose my temper on them. So don't let their pain control your response. Number 2, keep your pain separate from your child's pain. We have this ability to impute things to our children from our past. For an example, I have seen mothers who have said, and even parents, my child is having a meltdown. Well, that's because I haven't been able to see them all day today. And so now they saw me, and now they're having a meltdown because they hadn't been able to see me. No, they're having a meltdown because they're tired. What you're saying is you feel guilty for being away from them that day, and that's fine. But don't impute your feelings onto them, because you can't help them that way. You have to learn to separate, and maybe the parent had an issue in the past where their parents truly did neglect them and didn't connect with them. And so they began to view every circumstance through the lens of a past experience instead of just looking at the most logical explanation. We're in Bible class, and it's 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And I have a 2-year-old who usually goes to bed at 8. This should not be surprising that they're having a meltdown. So we have to keep our pain separate. Number 3, we have to teach our children in this process that life is not about avoiding pain. Life is not about avoiding pain. When is it that a person is willing to change? When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. That's when we change. For an example, let's think about our health. I get tired of not feeling good. Okay? If that pain of not feeling good then is greater than the pain I feel if I make myself exercise, I will make myself exercise because that pain is preferable to the pain of not exercising and staying unhealthy and not feeling good. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing, that's when we change. And thus, we have to help our kids understand that. And by the way, our children are not going to be able to avoid pain in life. So the goal is not to teach them to avoid it. The goal is to help them process it and handle it correctly. Okay? So, then we need to make sure that we're differentiating the two things. Is this a pain? Are they hurt? Are they frustrated because it's frustrating what they want to do, or because it's actually harmful for them? Am I actually doing, and we can do things that can harm our kids. But you and I both know there's a difference between the tantrum that says, I want my way, and my kid is actually really legitimately suffering over something. And that's what this is about. So we draw these lines, but we also have to evaluate them and not just assume, oh, my child threw up their hands and they pitched a fit, or they got their feelings hurt and cried and ran away. That means the boundary is bad. That does not mean the boundary is bad. That means you drew a boundary line and they don't know what to do with it. So you press forward. All right? The second principle or law that we'll think about tonight is the law of proactivity. That we don't throw tantrums, okay, in this sense. Now, what is interesting is this. Again, I love parenting because it's so ironic. We get onto our kid, they're trying to get something to work, a toy they're playing with, and then it doesn't work, and what do? They get mad and they throw it and they just smash it and do all kind of stuff, and we get on to them. We go to crank the weed eater and we can't get it to work. Do I even have to finish it? All right then. So maybe we could begin to view something that, first of all, we can take some of the self-righteousness out of our parenting. That says, this child, he doesn't understand a thing. Weed eater. Apparently, neither do you. So when we begin to look at it and kind of see the world through their eyes and to see ourselves for who we really are, we teach them to become proactive in their life and in problem solving. Because what's interesting is all of these, here are 5 reactions that children have to boundaries. But not surprisingly, these are the same 5 reactions adults have to boundaries. There are tantrums. You throw a fit. Mad at the computer. Not going to make it work, I promise. Oppositionalism. You defy the request. No. I'm not going to do it. Don't tell me adult people don't do that when their boss tells them to do something they don't want to do. I ain't doing it. Okay? There's whining. Whew, no overlap there. There's impulsivity, where a child will run away, or they'll say hurtful things like, I hate you, or I wish you weren't my parent, or all the different things that kids can say. First of all, the kid doesn't mean it. And we have to be willing to keep our head and to understand that this is what kids do. Okay? It's not a reflection on us. And then there is a 5th response that is one that is a little more concerning, that takes a different approach in how we address it. And that is when they turn to like fighting and violence, and they begin breaking things and taking it out on other people and things along those lines. That's its own peculiar animal we have to address. But either way, we typically respond to those things. So when we're talking to them about boundaries and being proactive, Jesus gives this principle to us in Matthew 5 and in Matthew 18, that if our brother sins against us, he doesn't say wait for him to come and apologize to you. He says go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. Address it. Address it. Learn to be proactive. Quit waiting on everybody else to solve the problem and solve it. Okay? So, when our children run up against a boundary, in essence, one of the things we have to be willing to do is to sit down next to our kids and talk to them. We got to be willing. A lot of times, to quote the fallen comedian Cosby, parents aren't interested in justice, they're interested in silence. I mean, really. We hear them fighting. He took my thing. Well, she's got all my stuff too. So what? Just be quiet. Many times we're more interested in peace than we are truly understanding and upholding what is right and what's wrong. If we're honest, you can see that. And honestly, there are times when I look at it and I can see myself that when I'm more short and I'm not as intentional with my kids because I'd rather be on my phone. I'm not willing to sit down and to actually teach them and talk to them about what's going on. Because what's going to happen when you run up against a boundary, son, you're going to run up against them your whole life. And yes, it does not, boundaries aren't necessarily fun, but they're good for us. And we have to learn how to respond to them and helping them to understand what those things are. And so we're teaching them, and we do this all the time when we say something like this. Well, my brother hit me, so I hit him back. And what do we say? That's not okay. You see, they're operating on the principle, the low-level survival principle that says, I will do to you like you do to me. We're trying to teach them to operate on the highest level principle, which is, I will proactively do good to you regardless of what you do to me. That's Matthew 7:12. And so, helping them to be proactive in the way that they treat other people and proactive when they run up against a problem, not spending their time constantly complaining about the problem. So, let's say we draw a line that says, we're not going to do screens this week. We're not going to watch TV. It's a busy week. We've got games, we've got homework, school, everything. No screens. That's not going to go unprotested. Okay? Now look, we can take the mentality that says I'm bigger than you and I can yell louder than you and you're going to do what I want. And we'll get what we want. We can get our way because we're bigger and older and we can enforce it. And I'm not saying, listen, I'm not naive enough to think I'm going to sit down with my son and say, now this is why we're doing it. He's going to say, oh, Father, thank you for instructing me. I don't have any notion that that is what is happening. But they need to hear it. Okay? You don't like the rule that we set for this week. You know what, buddy? You're going to run into things in your life you're not going to like. And it is okay for you to be bothered by that and to be agitated by that. But it is not okay for you to let that dominate you and your behavior and your attitude. What do you think? Force them to think. What do you think you could do with that time? Is there something more proactive? Maybe we should be grateful. When we get frustrated and we run up against this boundary, maybe we should be grateful we've got a school to go to. Maybe we should be grateful that we are able to play these sports. Maybe we should be grateful that we have a bed to sleep in. Maybe we'll learn to be grateful for the screens that sometimes we're not grateful for and we can kind of throw around and be haphazard with. What we're trying to do is to teach our children to think through. It's more than about just doing what I want you to do and just be quiet. I'm trying to teach you something as a small child that I hope can someday you learn to translate into your life, that when you run up against things you don't like, you don't have to let it dominate you. You can't control everything, but you can control yourself. Learn it. And that's the key. So, law of proactivity. Number 3, the law of envy. I'm happier when I'm thankful. James 4, and look, James 4, Genesis 3, the first temptation was about trying to get Adam and Eve to focus on what they did not have as opposed to what they had. If you go back and look at Genesis chapter 2, God says to them, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. Satan says, has God really said you can't eat of every tree of the garden? Do you hear the difference in those two statements? God says you can eat of every tree except one. Satan says, God said you can't have them all. Envy. Focus on what you do not have and ignore everything that you have. So we have to teach our children what envy, entitlement, and gratitude are. Envying what other people have. It's not wrong to look at what someone else has and say, I'd like to have that myself someday. But if it forces you to be ungrateful for what you have, that's a problem. There is a difference between being motivated and having ambition to get something that you want, and being ungrateful and cursing your life because it's not what that person has. Entitlement is, I believe I have the right to it. Why should you have this? Well, because I should. Well, buddy, I love you, but that ain't an answer. I can make you the list very quickly of what the world owes you. Nothing. And you need to understand sometimes that what you have because we choose to give it to you. And gratitude, when the child says, look, this is the 2024 version. I'm suffering over here. It's the 2024 version of the game. I want the 2025. Now look, we can stand there and yell and lecture them about ingratitude, or we can simply look at them and say, well, what about all the other people who don't have 2024? What about the people who don't have the system? What about the people who don't have all this stuff? We're trying to reframe. Listen, and this is a problem that's never going to go away. When you become adults, it's just bigger stuff. That's all it is. Your car is not this brand. Your clothes aren't this brand. This is that. The problem is that we don't grow up. We don't grow up, which tells me we must not be doing something right, especially on the front end. So how do we go through this? Well, as parents, we're going to give to our children. We're going to give to them many times, almost every time, we're going to give them more than what they need. We're going to give them a lot of what they want. And I don't think there's anything wrong with giving our kids some things that they want. But also, we need to limit certain things. And there's no hard and fast rule about what you should limit. But when they look at you and say, here, I want this. Okay? But we're not going to get it. Well, you've got the money. You're right, I do. I'm doing okay. But you don't. And just because I can give it to you does not mean I'm going to give it to you. Just because I can do this for you, especially if I get the notion that you become expectant of me to give it to you, that's when we're going to see a whole lot of limiting. It is fine. We work hard to give you, and your mother and I delight to give you all these things. But you need a perspective adjustment. You need a perspective adjustment. And so just because, and listen, there will be things in life, if we wanted to go buy some ridiculous car, a lot of us could probably do that. But doesn't mean that's what we should do. We can do a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that's what we should do. And so containing our children, helping them to understand that process, that life is better when you focus on what you have and quit focusing on what you don't have, and understanding that balance of having ambition, wanting to have certain things, that's not necessarily wrong. But if it starts getting to where you downgrade the things that you have, that's when we're having problems. When you can't appreciate what you have. And so we have to work on that with ourselves and with our kids. Number 4, the law of activity. As they put it, jump-starting my own engine. In essence, being self-motivated. The Bible talks to us about some of these things. I mean, even if you look in the prayer, in the discussion of prayer in Matthew 7, what does Jesus say? Ask, seek, knock. You got to do something. You've got to be proactive in this regard. So how do we help our children become proactive people? How do we help them understand activity? Well, first of all, we got to show them something, right? We got to be willing to get up and be active. They got to see some self-start and some drive in their parents. Now, they're not going to realize that yet. And a lot of the things, that's the important thing. A lot of the things that we teach our kids, they're never going to understand until they're on their own. Then it starts clicking. Oh, not everybody does have the drive to get up and go to work. Not everybody does have the drive to do this and to do that. My parents were actually very hardworking people, and I just didn't know it. I didn't know any different. But that's not how the world, not everybody operates that way. So, when we think about this with our kids and developing this activity in them, we have to look at whether we are enabling our children. Are we doing everything for them? Yes, I agree. Look, God bless the man who invented shoes with Velcro, okay? We can put them on and get them out the door. And yes, as parents, we can do it quicker and better than our kids can. But it does not mean that we should. They've got to learn how to do it. Well, I can't tie my shoes yet. Okay, but you can put your socks on. I'm not going to do everything for you. You have to learn that life, people aren't going to go out of their way to do things for you. You have to learn to do things. They have to understand that they have to take initiative and understand problem solving. And we have to give them time to develop. It can't be like, okay, from this point forward, I'm no longer tying your shoes for you. And then just become completely unreasonable, like there's no circumstance that says I'm ever going to tie your shoes. Look, you get in a freak accident and you hurt your back, I'll tie your shoes for you. So, it's not major things, and we don't even think about it that way. But there are little things that translate into big things, the bigger that we get. And we have to be a little more conscious, I think, of some of those things. Then the last one we'll talk about is the law of exposure. Honesty being the best policy. We have to teach our children about direct communication and full disclosure. In Exodus chapter 20, when God entered into covenant with the children of Israel, He gave them the parameters of the law and the 10 commandments, the 10 basic pillars of the law. God, there was nothing He said that was unclear. The expectations that He had of them were clear. He communicated clearly. So how do we teach our children to have boundaries? because they have to learn. Okay, I went to school and this person said they wanted my book and I wouldn't give it to them and they just took it from me. What do? That's a boundary line that somebody violated. And so when we talk about these boundaries, we need to understand and live by them ourselves. And we need to talk to our children. And when we have boundaries for them, we make them clear. This is what we're doing. This is what is expected of you. And this is the consequence for what happens if you violate it. Okay? Because then what we're telling them, and once we tell them, there's a preordained consequence that says, if you do this, this is the result. Do you know what you then as a parent can honestly look at your child and say? When they complain about the punishment, you can look at them and say, you chose this. I didn't choose it. You did. You knew what the rule was. You knew what the consequence was, and you decided you'd rather take the consequence than do what the rule said. You chose this, not me. And furthermore, I don't have to lose my temper and get mad. You know the rule, you know the consequence. Bring it to me. You just lost it. And they need to learn that. Also, make communication safe. Look, if our kids, again, and I may be considered a millennial liberal for this, but my kids are free to disagree with me. They're not free to be disrespectful. They are free to disagree with something I say. Because I may not know the situation. Listen, you walk in the middle of a fight, you just tread lightly until you figure out what's going on. I'm going to walk in and hand out spankings to everybody. Well, that may not exactly be what's needed right here. It could, and I'm not saying that's I'm just saying, let them know that they can talk to you, even if they disagree with you, and that you will hear them. Doesn't mean you will change or budge. You might. But I'm willing to listen to what you got to say. But when it comes to, and that becomes one of the issues, so we can't reinforce non-expression. So what happens when a child gets frustrated and they start throwing a tantrum in the floor, or they start whining? What is one of the things we will tell them to do? Use words. We've got too many people who are adults who, when they get upset, they pitch a fit. Because they've never learned the skills of saying, this is how I feel. And they're nothing but big babies who throw tantrums when things don't go their way. Because they've never learned to say, this is what happened and I did not like it. And sometimes the reason for that is because they're never allowed to have their feelings. But you know, we also need to teach our kids that when they draw, there are boundaries that they need to learn how to draw. And that one of the boundaries they need to learn how to draw, and a word they need to know, is no. You know, I've heard some people make some pretty bold claims when talking to their children. You see a child tell an adult no. And they say, you don't ever tell an adult no. I can think of several circumstances where I hope my children say no. You assume every adult has good intentions for your children like you do. They do not. If there's a strange person who says, your daddy sent me to pick you up, come get in my car, I want my kids to know how to say no. To an adult, no. And so it becomes a whole process that we're trying to figure out, and we're trying to help our kids figure it out too. And as we think about this last one, we went to honesty is the best policy. And God has made himself clear to us in what he expects. He's made himself clear to us in what he has done for us to forgive us and to extend forgiveness to us. No person can look at God at the last day and say, well, you weren't clear. He was clear. And when we were talking about discipline a moment ago, when you have a preordained punishment and the child chooses it, well, you didn't actually punish them, they did. They chose it. And that's what led C.S. Lewis in his writing, I believe it was Mere Christianity, to say this, that when a person goes to heaven, it's because they chose to say, your will be done to God. But when a person chooses not to listen to God and they choose to go in their own direction, God will then look at them and say, your will be done. This is what you chose. I did everything I could to keep you from having to face this, but you chose it. And I'm going to honor what you chose. It was not me. And so tonight, if we need to come to Jesus, we need to make the choice for him. Or we need to make the choice to choose him with a penitent faith, confessing him to be baptized in water for the forgiveness of our sins. Or maybe we're already Christians and we're struggling with some of these things ourselves, or maybe we're just struggling in general. We certainly want to help each other, because whether you call these things boundaries, whatever in the world you call them, you and I both know this is how God set up the world to operate. And we're simply trying to help ourselves and to help our children understand what God wants from us. So if we can help you tonight, we want to, as we stand and sing this song.